Neil's great schools made for the children of the poor in Camden Town. And there at Camden, the motto we wore on our cap badges was onwards and upwards. And the bus conductors would shout every morning, onwards and upwards, Camden girls, we don't want you on the bottom deck. Very clear. And somehow that drove into me the idea that women would go onwards and upwards. That Camden believed in you more than you believed in yourself, which is what great schools do. And the inspiration of those teachers at Camden who imparted the knowledge that they knew. They didn't just say, go and find it out for yourself. There was a bit of that. But they were pretty clear that the great teachers that I remember, like Miss MacDonald, who taught about Mussolini to the extent that she became so overexcited that she ate the chalk. Bash her on the back. Or Lizanne Radici, great historian, who got me into Newnham at Cambridge. But when I was interviewed at Oxford, in those days girls could be interviewed at both places because there were so few places for girls in either place, and I was extolling the virtues of Miss Radici's views of economic history. A terrible character who was sitting in the middle of the interview said, seems to me, Miss Cleverdon, that you seem to think that economic history is just about a lot of spice caravans wandering about in the desert. And I'd been told by my best friend, Gully Wells, I hate her, just written a rather good book on France, I'd been told by Gully that the character in the middle at St Hilda's was a male professor. So I said, no sir, I don't think that, and realised that she was not a male professor. Which was entirely surprising, I did not get off at the place at St Hilda's, but I did get to Newnham. And if I think back on Camden, careers advice was absolutely hopeless. And it is one of the great challenges in Britain to try to improve careers advice. I mean, I suppose the careers advice was that if you were a woman, you'd go into compassion, which was why when I came out at the end of Cambridge and we rather bossy and president of the JCR and so on and so forth, I thought large-scale social administration. That's what I want to do. That's how you change the world. So I applied to be an assistant prison governor and an assistant hospital secretary, and something so secret you couldn't discover what you'd applied for. Got the jobs in those rather halcyon days, lots of jobs for graduates then, early 70s, and couldn't make up my mind. And my tutor at Cambridge sent me to see somebody who she'd worked with years before in ICI, and he listened to this pathetic tale of indecision. And he said, my dear girl, patronising, I don't know what you think you're doing, dealing with the halt, the sick, the blind, the lame, and the criminal at the age of 22. You're not nearly old enough, and actually, at this moment in Britain, that isn't the biggest challenge. The biggest challenge for Britain then was how do you persuade free people to create the stuff in industry and commerce? You ought to be in industry. I said, I've never met anybody in industry in my life. My father's a BBC radio producer. He got Dylan Thomas to write Under My Wood. I've spent my entire life with a lot of lovies. I didn't know anything at all about industry. And it was 6 weeks later, I found myself in British Leyland's Swindon Body and Assembly Plant as the most junior in the Industrial Relations Department. Nobody more junior than me, other than the Industrial Relations Department CAD, carrying the notebooks into negotiations with the shop stewards and stamping the timekeeping cards. And for me, that, as a person who can't remember a time when I didn't have a cause or a campaign, that was the beginning of understanding something a bit about the importance of business and the importance of those who create the stuff in industry and commerce. But most of all, if I think now I'm onto the sort of pause moment, not the rewind where we've all come from, but just pausing. What did one learn looking back over the last 30 or 40 years in that career? I never ceased to be grateful to what I learned in education or the friends I made. I had the gathering the other day of 1 Alpha who met in 1961 30 little girls at Camden School for Girls, and of the 30, 2 were dead, 4 couldn't be tracked down, but the other 24 came together for dinner 6 weeks ago, because we built, as you've built, such a strong tribe in that school about the common values and the common vision. But what did I learn from British Leyland, then to the Anglo-American mining in South Africa, then to the Industrial Society, and then 20 marvellous years at Business and Community, and now the last 3 years working mainly for the Prince of Wales with his charities? Well, I learned that leadership is the key to making things happen. Schools, like factories, like fish, go bad from the head downwards. If the head's a great leader, then actually it absolutely runs. Talking just now to Stuart about heads he's worked with. What would you give one of the heads that he'd known in the past? 6 out of 10. You're never going to turn the world around. You're never going to achieve the results if you don't have absolutely outstanding leadership shaping the future, whether that's a school or a business or an organisation or a health trust. And I learned that at British Leyland as I stamped the timekeeping cards, hour after hour after hour, realising that they were more sick under Smith in Toolroom 1 than they were under Brown in Toolroom 2. And if you moved Smith to manage the lot that Brown had got, and you moved Brown to manage the lot that Smith had got, the lot that were well got sick, and the lot that was sick got well. The single biggest predictor as to whether people give the benefit of their doubt to their bed or their job, or whether people give of their best to their job, is to do with the answer to the question, who's the leader, who's in charge, who shapes it, who runs the culture. The youngest daughter, Victoria Alwyn Hope, is now the youngest, a very proud moment for her mother, is now the youngest detective sergeant in the Metropolitan Police. And has just been moved from Hackney to Lambeth in charge of robbery. We've had 1,200 robberies since the 1st of April in Lambeth, and so far we've only managed to actually sort out the answers to 8% of them. So as Victoria says cheerfully, it can only get better now. But the more, as I'm sure in this room, the more one hears the stories from the bottom up, the more one realises how critical leadership at the point of work actually is. So if I've learned something about leadership, I've learned a lot by watching business leaders interacting and connecting with the society around them, which is much what business and the community is concerned with. And the Prince of Wales, some 24 years ago, invented a programme called the Prince of Wales' Seeing is Believing programme, which invited senior business leaders to park their in-trays for half a day and come and look at something that they didn't perhaps know very much about. Some of them great buffs on the whole subject, others it had just passed them by. They didn't really take in what was going on in homeless hostels, or drug rehab centres, or very tough inner city schools, or difficult housing estates like Broadwater Farm, or any of those that appear regularly in the papers, particularly post the riots. Interesting to see for an organisation in business and community which began post-riots, and Heseltine and the Prince of Wales pretty close together in those days on the ways in which actually things could be done to tackle places of real deprivation and difficulty. And some great stories great things have been made to happen. If you have a look at Liverpool, where Heseltine began with that great Liverpool Garden Festival, even though every now and then the Scousers just appear to have a death wish on what they want to do with their future, actually Liverpool has lifted enormously in the last 20 years. But come to Burnley with me, where I go once a month for 24 hours to see what we can do together to raise the game for Burnley, a completely cut off northern mill town, 75,000 people, appalling riots in 2003, caused by disaffection and all the problems in that community, created by very poor white on the Stoops estate, where the BNP was most likely to get a hold. Or very poor rural Pakistani, disenfranchised, cut off, appalling schools, dreadful community, lack of cohesion. And I suppose for me, watching the way in which an individual can make a difference in supporting a community entrepreneur, like Neville Sims made for Dick Atkinson, or Stuart Toe made for the head of Alexandra School, gives me hope that actually, together, we can achieve practically anything in turning round the problems and the difficulties caused in deprived communities. So if I look back at some examples of ways in which individuals coming from business, but could come from anywhere, with a bit of clout and a bit of power, and a bit of energy and a bit of drive and a bit of can-do and a bit of Duracell battery, I've never forgotten these 4 examples where it's important to hold on to the fact that actually in the end it takes a village to raise a child. Bromsgrove is an amazing village with incredible connections and great parents and great catalysts and great teachers. But actually, you can do that in all sorts of places if you have a bit of a will and a clarity about what you want to do. I've never forgotten going with Mike Darrington, who was the chief executive of Greg's, great cafe operation. And we were in the northeast, where home of Greg's. And Mike Darrington, great man, done a lot of philanthropy, run a very successful business. He was out on the stump on the Seeing is Believing visit, talking to a head teacher in a primary school, particularly beaten down in Benwell, outer skirts of Newcastle, very difficult, very problematical. And he said to the head, "What are you doing at the moment?" The poor head said, "I'm trying to coordinate who's going to go to Tesco's to pick up the milk, the cornflakes, the bread and the margarine to try to run the breakfast club, which we have discovered is quite a way of improving attendance for our 5-year-olds." And Mike, not being quite clear about this, said, "Attendance for your 5-year-olds?" And he said, "Yeah. You see, the problem is that if nobody else in the house gets up because nobody's in a job, it's actually quite difficult to get the 5-year-olds to school. So we've discovered that 2 things make a difference. One, running a walking bus, so that we walk through the estate, picking up kids in the walking bus, and 2, providing breakfast in the breakfast club." And Mike Darrington said, "Look, your core business is education. My core business is breakfast. Supposing I take on the running of the breakfast club." Oh, thank God. And somebody said, didn't they, he fed them before he taught them. So actually, the running of the Greg's Breakfast Club, 57 breakfast clubs out in the northeast primary schools, great academic analysis done by Durham Business School on what was the evidence that kids actually learnt better if they had breakfast and not either fizzy pop or crisps left over from the night before. Outstanding analysis. Everybody said, "Oh, this is frightfully good. We should have breakfast clubs." I can't tell you the talent of getting breakfast clubs going. Anybody who can help us get breakfast clubs in some of the most deprived places, whether you use Magic Breakfast or whether you do it yourself, or whether anybody's a shareholder in Sainsbury's, writes to encourage Sainsbury's to keep going on their very good initiative of backing breakfast clubs in Burnley. Breakfast makes a fantastic difference. And that wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for that one man in the shape of my parent. Then I remember walking an estate in Sheffield on another series briefing, taking with me Yorkshire Water, Yorkshire Electric, Yorkshire Post, Yorkshire, everything you could possibly imagine. As you know, anybody here is Yorkshire. Yorkshire are very proud of Yorkshire. So we were having a certain amount of argy-bargy as we trailed through a rather tough Sheffield estate and paused again with a head teacher in a middle school. And she took the business leaders round, explained what the issues were, and then waved them away at the door and said, "Thank you so much for coming, sparing some time to come and have a look at our school on this estate. I don't expect you'll be coming back." And they paused, and she said, "And just while you're at it, you're obviously very proud of Yorkshire, and you're very proud of Yorkshire Post and Yorkshire Electric and Yorkshire Water and Yorkshire Telly. But could I just tell you that actually in Yorkshire there are 28,000 11-year-olds who leave primary school unable to read. And anybody who believes that the competitiveness of Yorkshire is going to be maintained while we are pouring 28,000 kids through a secondary school that they cannot access the education because we haven't managed to teach them to read, sadly disillusioned you will be." And of course,